Hi, everyone. Welcome. We see a couple people joining us already this evening. We're excited to get started in just a couple of minutes. Hi, everyone. We're excited to see a couple people joining in as I'm speaking. So we're going to give everyone just a couple more minutes before we get started, and we will start chatting with our fantastic panelists. Good evening. It is 7 o'clock. We are going to give everyone one more minute. Those folks that just are logging on so they don't miss any of the good stuff, and we'll get started in 1 minute. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Hope College Connection Live Creative Jobs for English Majors. We are delighted to be chatting about such a fun topic this evening, and excited to see so many folks that are joining us, whether you're an alum, a friend of the college, or a current student that's really interested in this field. We're excited to have you. A few housekeeping things for this evening. First of all, who am I? I'm Kate Ralston. I work for the Alumni Engagement Office at Hope College. So excited to be welcoming alum here today, as well as current students. I do want to give you a couple of instructions for the evening. If you would like to ask a question, there is a Q&A box, usually located at the bottom of your screen. Sometimes it moves around a bit, but if you can find that Q&A box, that's where we would like you to enter any questions throughout the night. We will leave some time at the end of the evening to make sure that we ask the panelists some questions. If you wanted to make any comments or give advice, in addition to the panelists, we'd love to hear that as well. We'll be collecting that throughout the evening, and then later we will send that out to our participants so they're able to collect that information and use it later. So don't feel that advice you're giving is just going off into an abyss. We will make sure that it is useful. So feel free to share your insight as well. The last thing we want to make sure that you are aware of is that the Hope College Connection is a fantastic online platform that you can use as a friend of the college, an alum, or a current student to connect with folks throughout many different industries, and including those that are in English-leaning fields. And we would love for you to join that going to connection.hope.edu. It's a fantastic way to connect, learn, and get some insight from folks all throughout different fields. So we'd love to see you join that. Without further ado, though, I want to introduce the interim department chair of the English department, associate English department professor, who will be joining us and giving us a little insight on our moderator, Pablo Pesquera. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Kate. And thank you to Kate Ralston and Amanda Root at the Alumni and Family Engagement Center, and to Megan Schelt at the Bourland Center for Calling and Career for helping to set this up. And I'm here to really thank everyone for joining. This is the first kind of event we've had in the English department for English department majors and alumni. And it's wonderful to see 3 alumni who I've met and 1 who I haven't yet met, at least in person. So this is a real pleasure. I'd also like to introduce Eileen Ellis, who will be graduating in 2023, and she will be the moderator. She's an English major with an emphasis in creative writing, and she's actually a Holland native. She is a really charming student. She's a brilliant reader, and she will be studying in Dublin next semester to study more creative writing. Eileen presented a poem in class today that was truly smashing, and we had to give her a round of applause for the quality of poem and the way she has been managing to find her voice. So thank you so much, Eileen, for moderating tonight's panel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Pablo. I appreciate all of the kind words. No pressure there, right? So yeah, I'm Eileen Ellis. I'm an English major graduating in 2023 and definitely excited to be here, but a little nervous, I'll admit. So bear with me because I'm more of a writer than a talker sometimes. So I'm sure I'm not the only one, but without further ado, we'll have the panelists introduce themselves, tell us what they're currently doing and a recommendation for a must read. And we'll start with Matthew and then go to Annette, Natalie, and Chris.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Baker. I'm a prose writer, a fiction writer. So I write short stories and then long form works like novels. And it's really difficult to choose just one must read recommendation. But I think I'm going to recommend Building Stories by Chris Ware, which is usually described as a graphic novel, but it comes in this giant box. It weighs like 100 pounds because there's so many strange things inside. So that's one of the weirder things I've ever read, and I would definitely recommend that you all check it out.
Good evening. My name's Annette Bourland, and I'm from the class of 1994. I'm the founder of Bourland Strategic Advisors. That is a organization that I started 2 years ago, currently working with publishing houses to consult them on imprints that they want to launch. Also a literary agent for a few clients that are in the various stages of publishing their work. And I also consult global investment companies wanting to get into the publishing world. Before starting my own business, though, I spent 12 years working in various roles at HarperCollins Publishing House. And I was able to be the group publisher overseeing adult nonfiction, children's YA, and curriculum, served on their global leadership team, which was very interesting to be able to have a global view of what's happening in publishing. And before that was at Reader's Digest magazine. So jumped from magazines into books. And my must read, I highly recommend a book called Designing Your Life. It's extremely helpful to tap into the creative side of how many of us who went through the English department might think, but then it also has the practical application of finding a life and building a career that you'll really nestle into and enjoy for a long time. So anyway, I just thought Designing Your Life would be a great recommendation tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Brown. I'm a 2017 graduate. I feel incredibly honored to be here, and I feel like I'm in such great company. Since graduating college, I published a book in 2018, self-published. It's called 52 Cups of Coffee, and it's actually something that I started working on while I was a student at Hope. And then from there, I've done marketing, copywriting, content writing, ghostwriting, lots of different things in that field, as well as public speaking and preaching when I'm invited different places. And then last fall, 2020, I started a ministry called 414 Ministries, which is really a creative digital platform to inspire and empower women to live in purpose and on purpose for such a time as this. And my must read is Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. I love this book because it doesn't just get into the technicality of writing, but it talks about writing as a lifestyle. And I love that it just really, it challenges and encourages and inspires each reader to see writing as a way of life, not just something that you do on a piece of paper.
Cool. Hey, everybody. My name is Chris O'Brien. Just like Natalie said, I'm excited to be with this group. It's an honor to be here. I graduated from Hope almost 10 years ago now. And I have a buzz cut, the same buzz cut that I had when I was in second grade. I've just never updated my hairstyle. I founded a company called Long Overdue about 3 years ago. And it was from my experience writing and editing and trying to figure out, traditional publishers and self-publishing. And so through that experience, came up with Long Overdue, and I've been helping out authors finish their long overdue books. So whether it's in the idea stage or the 25th draft that they just can't quite get across the finish line, that's what I've been working on. For the must read, I almost ran off camera to grab it and hold it up to the camera, but I couldn't get there in time. My favorite book of all time is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. So I read it when I was 16 or 17. It changed my life. I loved it. And then I was actually afraid to read it again, because I was like, I'm going to read it and I'm going to think it's, not as good, but reading it right now. And I think I'm enjoying it more than ever. So highly recommend East of Eden.
All right, for our first question, we're gonna start with Matthew, and it's, how did you get started on your career path, and what advice would you give someone wanting to break into your industry?
So from Hope, I went straight into grad school, into a creative writing MFA program at Vanderbilt. And that experience was, I would say, what launched me on my career path and got me to the place where I am now. So I guess as far as advice to current students, I can only really say what's worked for me, and there's many different paths to success. But in the experience that I had when I was trying to decide whether or not to go to grad school, or whether to move to New York or Los Angeles or wherever and work as a bartender or a barista or a temp in some random office. I think I would really highly recommend going the grad school route, unless you specifically want to write a book about a bartender or a barista or a office temp, because otherwise I honestly don't know how valuable that experience would be. And I think it's an extraordinary opportunity to get to have your day job be for 2 to 3 years, just to read literature and to talk about literature and to think about what makes some literature good or bad, or what makes some literature interesting or boring. A day job where you get to learn all day from other writers. So I would highly recommend that.
All right, our next question for Annette. How has your experience as an English major helped you in the positions you have had over the length of your career?
Yeah, I have first of all confess that I didn't attend Hope College thinking I would be an English major. I went to Hope College thinking I would be one of the first female stockbrokers, and I was going to get my accounting degree. But by the time I became a junior, my advisor realized that I had enough credits to become an English major, and I was able to participate in an internship my fall semester of my senior year that kind of goes in conjunction with getting started on my career path that Matthew just had talked about. But all that to say, the internship was a fantastic opportunity, not only to get some credit, but also to get experience. And so that really helped quite a bit. But then the English major in particular There are three things really that come to mind when I think of the answer for this. The art of the written word has helped me immensely, being able to organize thought, craft a story, and clearly communicate. That has, whether I'm preparing slides to do a audio presentation, or if I need to write out and explain myself through letters, emails, memos, etc., that has always really helped. I think relationally, the English major has helped me connect with creative people, to understand the writer's euphoria and the writer's angst when trying to get 55,000 words in order and making sense for a full and complete manuscript. And also just the importance of having a good editor or a really helpful critique group, and the idea that exchanging opinions and looking at each other's work and being open to other people's opinions is really, really helpful, not only just in crafting a piece of literature, but also in just the normal daily life of trying to navigate business decisions with those around me. So the English major has just really helped in all of those various ways.
And of course, anyone else, if you would like to answer this question, can do that too, for the other panelists.
I think one thing that came to mind was, so for the last 3 years, trying to start Long Overdue and basically do everything from scratch. The process has felt a lot like writing a book, where you start with this one draft and you work on it, and then you're like, oh, that's not what I pictured. And then you go back and you revise and you try something out. So there's some themes from 3 years ago that still exist today, but there's a lot of ideas that I look back at, or I look at a old post and I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, where was I taking this? What was I doing? And so I've felt that the writing process and the starting a business process have felt very similar. And similar to what Annette said, when you're making an announcement in a newsletter or whatever it is, like, you really have to be concise and get to the point and try to figure out what's going to connect with the audience, and all that stuff that we worked on in creative writing classes. I've seen almost an unexpected way show up when starting something from scratch.
All right. Next question, and we'll start with Natalie on this one, and then anyone else. How has networking played a role in your success?
Networking has played a huge role in just the career path that I've taken. As a self-proclaimed introvert, when I was in college, I used to always be really intimidated by the word networking and just the idea of networking. But what I've found is that networking is really an opportunity to create authentic connections with a simple introduction. And so I found that to be true in college with the connections I've made with other students, with faculty, staff, professors that I still maintain to this day. But I've also found that to be true post-college as well. And so I was thinking about this the other day, and I only graduated in 2017, but a majority of the jobs I've gotten, a majority of the projects that I've taken on and opportunities I've had, they haven't come from even LinkedIn or sending out my resume to different places. They've come through the connections that I've built, simply introducing myself to other people, telling them, hey, this is what I'm interested in, or this is what I'm trying to do, or you really inspire me with what you're doing. Would you have a conversation with me? That's led to other opportunities in my field. And then when I self-published my book back in 2018, I was 23 at the time. I didn't have a large social media following. I didn't have this big marketing plan, but I had this story and I wanted to be able to inspire and encourage other people with this book. And so I saw connections and networking play such a huge role in that again, because people, they engaged with me, and then one person would buy multiple books for their Bible study or their church or their book club, and then they'd invite me to come speak. And so I was really able to see that, again, a simple conversation, a simple introduction, and creating that authentic connection can have such a ripple effect in leading you to new spaces, and really expanding your circle.
Yeah, I wanted to play on that a little bit. Networking. So the internship that I just mentioned wouldn't have happened if an English professor didn't have a friend who had started a magazine. And I was going to be a stockbroker, and that internship changed me 180% or degrees in turning towards really living into the English major. And so that was the first step in networking. 3 weeks after I graduated from Hope College, I contacted the alumni office and asked them if they could connect me with anyone who had graduated with the word editor, publisher, and there was one other thing I can't remember, but anyway, they connected me with these people who were Hope College alums. And I interviewed informational interviews for each of them. And 6 of those people invited me to New York City to interview with their HR department. And then I went to New York City, and while I was there for interviews, I got hired on the spot at Reader's Digest magazine because of a Hope College alumni. So, that networking is just so key, and it's just one step in front of the other. It doesn't have to be, huge and overwhelming. But with that, I always keep in mind that I should never discount a connection. When you're talking with people at dinners, or you're able to meet a friend of a friend, you just never know where that's going to go. So always keep that person's name and email, even if you don't know how it will result into something yet. But just, I'm with Natalie too. I am a natural introvert. So sometimes though, you just have to be gutsy and be as prepared as you can to reach out to people and take that step.
Yeah, one thing that helped me, I had a mentor, he flipped the script. So he was like, imagine, a high school senior or high school junior reached out to you and said, hey, I'm looking for some help on what to do with, I want to be a writer, or I want to do an English major. What would you say? And I'd be like, well, yeah, of course I would respond. Then he's like, well, don't you think the same principle might apply the other way around? And it was so simple, but that switch in my head was something I'd never really thought about. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll ask and see if they'll respond. And I've seen pretty good results from whether it's trying to apply for a job or just literally saying, hey, I'm looking for help. I saw that you're a literary agent, or I saw you're an editor. I'm just looking for some advice. It is scary, but it's a lot more effective than you might think.
Yeah, we got a question in the Q&A that I think works really well with the networking question. And you guys have touched on it a bit about mentorship, but the question is, how has mentorship played a role in your career path? And perhaps there's an example you have of a specific relationship that helped you along the way.
I think something that's been valuable for me, and I think this goes a little bit into what you were saying, Annette, is not discounting any connection. And so for me, I do look, when I'm looking for mentors, I do look for people that are in my field, but I also look for people that are emulating lives that I want to live. So even if someone is an accountant, but I see that they're passionate about the work that they do, I see that they have a good work-life balance, I seek those types of people and say, hey, show me how you were able to create a life that you love while doing work that you're passionate about. And so while I was a student at Hope, I really gravitated towards people that I saw them living with passion and joy and fulfillment in the work that they were doing. And they were able to help me in a business sense, absolutely, but they also helped me to recognize how I could take what I was passionate about in the work that I wanted to do and use that to create a fulfilling life on my end as well.
Yeah, I had a mentor. My first boss at Reader's Digest was this fantastic woman. Her name was Eleanor Griffith, and she hired me. And after several weeks of being at Reader's Digest, I was able to ask her or let her know that I was interested in going further in the world of publishing. And did she have any ideas how I could do that? Because I had a few of my own. So I asked her if I could read the notes from certain meetings, if I could pitch her some ideas for the magazine, even though I knew that maybe they wouldn't go any further than her, but she could give me feedback. And it's really just looking for those opportunities and engaging with a mentor to let them know what you want to do, and then having them give you some advice or some opportunity to do tasks or to write things or to, just bounce ideas off of as you go forward. And just, again, like all those small things of learning along the way really add up to a lot. So even if you're just reading the notes from a meeting that you can't attend, you can learn a lot from the discussion that was had and the final outcome of their decisions. Yeah.
All right. Next question, and we'll start with Chris, is what's the biggest challenge you have faced in your career, and what is one piece of advice you would give to current English majors?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this. I would say patience has been one of the biggest challenges for me, where especially this dynamic of like day job versus dream job. I've carried that with me for like 9 years ever since graduation, this idea of, hey, I really want to write and I want to work on books, and that's the dream. But got to pay bills and got to do that. And there's always, a lot of times there's this friction between the two. And one time I just asked a coworker I knew who he worked in just data and analytics, but then he was also writing and he did improv and he'd worked on TV shows before. And I just asked if he'd meet me for lunch. And I was like, how do you do it? Like, it seems like you've got this nice balance of your job and then you're still pursuing the dream job. And what he said to me was, when he was working on a TV show, he still had parts of the job that he didn't like. So getting notes that, hey, this part wasn't good, or we're cutting this part. And it was this realization for him where there's always ups and downs, even in the quote unquote dream job. So he told me more about like finding the balance. That's only one piece, but he had a wife and he has kids and he does this and he's got his own family. And it helped me to kind of picture things as a whole and not just the dynamic between dream job and day job. So the advice I would give is have this section of your day. For me, it's in the morning. That's just completely off limits. So for me, that's time to write, and I don't let anything interfere with it. So if it's writing or reading, block something off and make sure that you're continuing to pursue the dream, even if it's not lining up with your day job at the time. Sometimes it lines up, sometimes it doesn't, but if you can protect that space, that's been really helpful for me.
One of the biggest challenges for me, being someone who loved the finance side, but really loves the relational and creative side of writing, trying to balance a large company's corporate drive for revenue and profit versus creating world-class literature and nurturing relationships and creativity. That was really difficult for me, and it is a big challenge because working in the publishing industry, everyone's still there to make money. So, you have to try to educate yourself on the bigger picture sometimes of why are we making certain decisions, what plays into that financially, balanced with the love of the writing and the love of the author. Yeah, sometimes that can be a tough challenge to make sure that you're staying true to both of those pieces. And then also, as you look at various places that you might want to work, just think about what is their overall mission. Is their mission to appease and make sure that the stockholders and shareholders are happy, or is the mission more philosophical in the sense that they want to enhance the lives of particular readers and consumers? But I try to, my advice to English majors, I guess, would be just to do your research on various companies that you want to work for. And then if you're not so keen on a particular area, like the drive for revenue and profit, then maybe educate yourself so you understand the why before you're frustrated with it.
I think a challenge that I've faced, and this might be a little bit more of a vulnerable answer, but it's the truth, is dealing with imposter syndrome. And I think that whenever you work in a creative realm, especially when it comes to your own projects versus projects you're doing for other people, there can be this tension and this tug that you feel towards, is this good enough? Is this ready yet? Like, I feel like sometimes English majors and writers and creative thinkers, we can be the hardest on ourselves, even though the work that we're doing is so important in bringing beauty and insight to a world and hope that needs to hear those things. And so something that I am constantly challenging myself with is putting my best out there and putting my all into my work, but also not holding myself in bondage to that work, finding the courage to say, this work is valuable and this is important. And I deserve to share this with the world because it has meaning, the same way that, you know, some of the more, I don't want to use the word practical, but some of those other jobs that we see, they have value as well. So does the work in our creativity.
I think another big challenge for creative writers can be learning how to live with constant rejection, or how to handle constant rejection, because a fundamental part of that life or that career path, if you're going to submit your stories or your poems or your essays to magazines, is you're going to get a lot of rejections. And some of you may have already had this experience if you've worked on staff at Opus or somewhere else, but it was really a mind-blowing experience to me when I first worked on the staff of a literary magazine that was founded and operated by just 8 or 9 fellow students in this graduate program. And it should have been obvious from the very beginning, but there was a moment when we sat down to start deciding and voting on what stories and poems we were going to publish in our first issue. It was mind-blowing to me to realize that all along, all of these magazines across the country and across the world were just operated by a bunch of random people like me who liked writing, but also had totally arbitrary tastes. And you know, there would be you know, one of the editors would get funneled a particular story or poem that they would just fall in love with, and they would, you know, they would be willing to fight to the death to get that into the magazine. But if it ended up in the hands of a different editor, it might have never even made it to the final round table. And so I guess that can be an enormous challenge, I know, for creative writers. And I think to the extent that it's possible, I think it can help to learn to think about it in realistic terms, and just to continue to submit your writing widely and not take rejection personally, or with the idea that a rejection letter means, oh, this piece of writing isn't good, or it doesn't deserve to exist in the world. It just means that was not the right place to bring it into the world, but that place is always still out there somewhere.
I think that was very well said, Matthew, because being on the other end of being on a publishing board and deciding what is published and what isn't, I wholeheartedly agree with you that if it lands on a particular desk of one editor and they love it, they will fight to the end to get it published. So even if you have submitted your work to one person at one magazine or one publisher, doesn't mean you shouldn't be submitting it to several others, because it may just not be that cup of tea for that particular person, but you just haven't hit the right individual yet to partner and collaborate with. So I wholeheartedly applaud you, Matthew, for bringing that up and for encouraging people not to take one rejection letter as a judgment on the entire creative process and what you've contributed to the world. So just keep going.
Yeah, my ratio might be especially bad, but I found that it's like usually somewhere between like 25 to 75 places have to reject it before I find the place that's actually going to be excited about it. So yeah, it for me at least, it eventually has gotten to the point where I get very excited whenever I get a rejection, because it's like, okay, good, we got that one out of the way. We're getting closer to wherever it's meant to be. But
And also, I just want to add one more thing, the timing. You may have something that you're pitching and it's very good. But again, when I talked about the biggest challenge for me was weighing the dollars and cents, the revenue and profit side, you might just be 6 months too early or 9 months too late for a particular publishing outlet. So, even if you have submitted it, you can try again 6 to 12 months later with the same thing, the same person, but the timing might be better. So, yeah.
Our next question, actually, it works pretty well with some of the things we've brought up, but what is one failure you've had in your career and what did you learn from it? I don't know if anyone has any specific examples that they want to bring up and pour some lemon juice on it for everyone. and this one's for everyone too.
well, this isn't one specific failure, I guess, but in my experience, I have found if you're a poet and you're working on a collection of poems or some big project, or for me as a prose writer, working on a novel or other book length projects, and you can spend years working on a book that eventually you're going to realize isn't publishable or doesn't realize kind of the vision you had for it in your mind. But I've found for me those big failed projects, which can consume months or years of a working life, can actually be very instructive. And when I think back on it, I realized that I learned a lot of what I was going to need to create some of these successful projects by living out those failures. And so I think failure in many ways can actually be more valuable, at least as an experience, than a success. It's just the success is what you want, obviously.
I think one for me, I don't know if I'd call this a failure or just a big regret, but kind of going back into like when you struggle with perfectionism, it can really get in the way of work actually getting done. And so a few years ago, I had this public speaking opportunity that I was really excited about. It was kind of the biggest platform I'd ever done. They were flying me out there and I was really excited, but really nervous. And I had about 2 months to prepare for it. And I was thinking about it every day. I would jot down notes every now and then about what I wanted to say, what I wanted to talk about. but I just couldn't figure it out. Like I couldn't figure out what's like the main theme, what's the main message that I'm trying to get across. And before I knew it, it was like 2 days before I had to leave, and I still felt like I did not have a solid message that I wanted to give. And so the next 2 days leading up to the speech, I was up all hours of the night trying to finalize my last few words. I was extremely tired when it actually came time to give my speech. And when I was thinking about it in hindsight, I had to just really remind myself and kind of correct myself for next time, like, don't worry so much about things being perfect. Take time to actually just do the work, even if it's not everything that you want it to be, you know, that first or second or even third try. Just keep wrestling with it, keep working towards it, and eventually you'll have something, even if you don't love it at the end of the day. But I think for me, trying to create this perfect speech left me with no speech until the very end. So that was, you can call it a failure and regret all wrapped up in one.
Yeah, I want to echo that big time, Natalie. The things that I regret the most and that I see as failures right now are the things that I didn't attempt or didn't try for. So I'm looking at my screen. I see Pablo, his face right in the center of my screen, and I distinctly remember the end of senior year. He, messaged the English majors, said, read. We're gonna have this platform to read a short story, whatever, something that you want to share. And I chose not to do it. I was like, what if I get up there and I'm nervous and my voice sounds funny or whatever it is. And I'm looking at Pablo right now and I still feel kind of ashamed that I didn't do it that day. So Matthew's advice, I can't agree with more, where like this idea of the rejection is a lot scarier than actually experiencing it. And so I don't want to correct that part of myself, because it still shows up. Even when I was invited to this panel, I still had that voice of like, let's not do it. So it's still there, but I've learned to not let that voice kind of have the final say, and try to do some more things that are a little nerve-wracking or scarier.
If I could just respond to that really quick, I really appreciate that you said that, because I think when I was in college, I thought that, the fear of trying something would go away after I got my first job. Like, it's kind of like, oh, okay, I got this now. But what I found is that, kind of like you said, it doesn't go away, but that was never the goal, to have your fear go away. It's to show up in the midst of fear, to express that faith in the midst of fear. And I think that's when the biggest breakthroughs and the biggest opportunities come. So I just appreciate you saying that, because I wish I more consciously understood that when I was in undergrad.
I think I gave nod to this earlier, but some of my biggest failures are discounting people that I have met and thinking, oh, well, I don't know who they are and I probably won't ever work with them again, and discounting the value or the worth or the insight that people I could have been in contact with had I paid more attention, given more thought to who they were, and maybe even kept the business card that they gave to me. So that goes along with a little bit of advice.
Yeah, we had this children's book that we did, and the illustrator was married or is married to an accountant. And I immediately bucketed. I was like, okay, illustrator's creative, accountant's not. But when it was time to like figure out the rules of printing and shipping in Minnesota, and how does that work, and how many copies, and how does the tax work, like he got really into it. And he's like, oh, you got to do this, and then if it's over this many copies, it's this. And that's when it hit home to me of like, oh yeah, accounting, legal, that stuff is part of the creative process. And he was excited too. So it was kind of a wake-up call to me, where it's like, it's not just English majors and artists. There's a lot of creative people in different roles.
We have some questions in the Q&A about internship and job searching and how to begin with that. So if you want to answer that as well. And then we have another question about what are good places to intern in as an English major, and specifically for an editor or a proofreader. But we can start with, how do you even begin this process?
All right, I've jotted down 3 ideas. The first one, so if you're on LinkedIn, I have a friend, Adina Edelman, who she posts on LinkedIn pretty often, and all she's doing is giving advice on sentences. So she'll say, all right, today, when do you put the comma before the and when do you not? And when do you use, her post today was blonde with E at the end versus no E. And she'll just do posts talking about questions like that. And her business usually comes through those posts because people say, oh, I vaguely remember this woman named Adina, and she does editing. And so she receives a lot of her business that way. So I'd recommend getting on LinkedIn and doing some posts where you're just like teaching about grammar and editing. There's a company called Parker Dewey, where you can put your profile and what sorts of projects you can help with and some samples. And so that's a way that companies can reach out. It's paid. It's not 30-hour project or 20-hour. So that one's called Parker Dewey. And then the third idea was just to team up. So it's really hard to go out there alone. But if you and a couple students say, okay, we offer editing and copywriting, and this person does video, and then you start by reaching out to like a small business and seeing if you can help them. That's a way to start building your portfolio. And then you don't have to feel like you only offer one thing. So I'd recommend teaming up with some people.
While I was at Hope, I interned with Grand Rapids Magazine, and I believe the editor who was there at the time has since left, so I don't know who the current editor is, but that was a very valuable experience for me. And even as an intern, I was getting sent out on these kind of wild projects where they would like say, go ride in this 2-seater plane with this random pilot at this airfield, and then we have to write about it, or go to this restaurant and go try some of this food. So that was a job or internship that came with many perks, I think.
All right, another question in the Q&A is, how have your experiences at Hope helped you grow professionally and personally? And what is unique about Hope that helped you in this way?
I think the connections that I made at Hope had a world of a difference in my life and career. I think one of the unique components of Hope that it is such a small school, but also that so many of the people that are at Hope working, they're so passionate about cultivating student leaders and cultivating agents of change in the world. And so I really found that there was a lot of professors and staff that were really for me. They wanted to see me succeed. They wanted to see me well connected. And so for me, being intentional about those relationships while I was a student, getting coffee with people, making sure I checked in and sent my emails, but then even post college, following up with those people, it really made a difference. And being willing to continue that mindset of a student, asking questions, telling them in areas that I needed help, sharing when I needed a connection or needed, advice about a job or something like that. So for me, the unique hope factor is that there are people that really, it's not just a job for them. They're really passionate about helping the students, and really taking advantage of that and really connecting with those people on a personal level.
I think something for me that made a tremendous difference as I was starting to begin about literature and creative writing was just the incredible wealth of opportunities that there are on Hope's campus alone, and having the opportunity to volunteer with Opus or with the Visiting Writers Series. I don't know if this is still a component of the Visiting Writers Series, but at the time when I was there, the professor who was overseeing the Visiting Writers Series also forced all of us Visiting Writers Series interns, we each had to choose a visiting writer who we were going to interview, and then we had to try to publish it. And everybody was very grumpy about that we had to do that. But that was also, those conversations I had with visiting writers who would be visiting the campus for just a few hours, but taking advantage of that opportunity. Those conversations ended up being very enlightening for me, and also those interviews ended up being some of my earliest publications, and so I think helped sort of establish me as I was sending out other writing to magazines or journals, and so I think as much as I learned in the classroom, it was the extracurriculars at Hope that in some ways taught me the most.
Another question we have in the Q&A is about COVID and the pandemic, and it's asking for any advice for people looking for jobs during the pandemic and didn't get those opportunities to intern and network. And if you have any advice on that for people that kind of had it especially tough during this time.
Yeah, I can't imagine. So anyone that's gone through this last 2 years at Hope, I don't know how you've done it. The one very small positive, I guess, if it can be said, is companies have opened up their searches all across the country because it doesn't matter as much where you're physically located. So there are instances where you may be able to, using that Parker Dewey site or whatever site you're using, you might land an internship that couldn't have happened 3 years ago because they wanted somebody physically there. So one small win over the last 2 years.
I would agree with that advice. I think that, and I feel for you as well. I'm really sorry for all that the current students have had to go through with COVID and the pandemic. I do think one thing in alignment with what you just shared is that the world does feel a lot smaller now, and there is kind of more of an open mindset people have about hiring, whether it's across the country or across the world, there's a little bit more flexibility that people are willing to extend. Something that I found in my own journey and process is even just reaching out to different people in businesses and kind of sharing, what you're interested or what you do, whether that business hires you or not, sometimes they know somebody else that's looking for exactly what you have to offer. And so there really is power in just getting the word out there, because it kind of creates people's ears to think of you when they run across an opportunity or if they have another opportunity. The first job that I got, in 2018, after I did a year-long work fellowship, happened through someone that I met just at a luncheon. She was in marketing. I told her that I was interested in marketing, looking for different work. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, you have to meet this woman that I know. I recently interviewed her for another project." I met with that woman. We connected really well. And I've been doing projects with her ever since. So sometimes it's literally just the word of mouth connection that lands you somewhere you weren't even intending to land, but it gets you where you need to be.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I agree too that, I didn't have to go through the hardships of COVID and being kind of disenfranchised from the rest of the world during those particular months that everyone had to keep their distance or things were closed down. But during my time at Hope College, I worked at a local independent bookstore. And even though I worked there because I loved books, but I realized later that while I worked there, I learned about authors, I learned about distributors, I learned about publishing houses, I learned about the New York Times list, I learned about hardcover to softcover conversions. I learned so much about just the publishing industry from working at a bookstore. And that actually was one of the reasons why the people at Reader's Digest liked what they saw after I had graduated, because they could see an expressed interest in writing and in publishing, even though, that means working at Barnes and Noble or working at the local library. I wrote newsletter articles for the independent bookstore that I worked for. I tried to edit as much as I could, just the little independent business pieces, the emails we sent out, the marketing copy we had to do. I offered to work on the website so I could teach myself coding. And so just keep in mind that every activity and relationship has a potential to contribute to the goal you have in mind, even though it may not be exactly what you want to be doing right now. So, I wanted to be an editor, I wanted to be a proofreader, but first I had to work at the bookstore for a while. And so that isn't a waste of your time. Any type of activity that is an expression of what you want to do is showing that you have the tenacity, you have the desire, and you're trying to make the best out of a situation that maybe isn't exactly where you want to be, but it will be a stepping stone. So I would just encourage you to think of it that way. And yeah, editing the church newsletter may not be very glamorous, but it also shows on your resume that you have been helping out that way. And so I think that's really big. And I also just typed into the chat session here. I'm not sure if the notes will be shared or not, but mediabistro.com is a great website for anyone interested in the publishing world. And they have really great webinars. So if you want to do a webinar in proofreading, that's 3 hours and not super expensive, I would recommend their services. I've taken some of their classes and they're really good. But it's also a great place to see what types of jobs there are and internships. And Media Bistro mostly services, the bigger and larger places like Chicago and New York and LA and Nashville, but they do have a nice swath of information from across the country and in every state of the country. So it might be interesting to go on mediabistro.com.
I had one thought. So Long Overdue's Instagram is run entirely by Annie Sarovich, and she graduated last year, English major. And it's a cool example of, I don't know anything about Instagram. I'm terrible at design. So when she offered to help, like, I handed that whole thing over. So I have no rules or instructions because I don't know how to do it. And so she's been able to make it completely her own. So when she's able to share that work, it's her work and not somewhere more established where it might be, hey, I want you to post this thing at this time and do this. So it is a good idea to find some startups or the coffee shop or the church. Like, there's a lot of places that would be happy to pass some of those things off, and then you can have a little bit more of your vision and your art put into it.
Yeah, and I would imagine I'm on the advisory board with Professor Van Dynen and the big Lakeshore Read and Little Lakeshore Read. And I would imagine that there's opportunities for you to participate somehow with that group, or even in meeting some of the authors that come through and talking to them about what their experience has been. So I'd encourage students to look into that if you haven't already.
All right, we have time for the last question in our Q&A chat. How important is grad school for being able to get an editing and proofreading job?
I personally don't feel like that's a necessity or a must-have. It's a nice to have if that's what you're interested in, but most of the time, proofreading and editing is really about experience and just honing your craft. Deciding perhaps what type of proofreading and editing you want to do. Is it fiction or is it nonfiction? And then from there, perhaps are there particular areas that you'd like to become more pronounced in? So for example, if it's fiction, is it sci-fi? Is it YA? Is it romance? Or if it's nonfiction, is it business writing or historical memoir, those types of things? But I don't necessarily feel that getting a degree beyond Hope College is necessary. I do think I went to the Denver Publishing Institute, and there are some intensive, I believe there's 3 or 4, one through Stanford, one through Columbia University, and one through Denver, that are intensive. I believe they're either 6 or 8 week courses, and that they're very pricey. So I'll warn you of that, but they're extremely good at making sure you have a job in the publishing world after you've gone through, and you meet so many amazing people, not only your cohort and the professors, but also the networking. And they sometimes will have a week of magazine and then the rest is on book, or different specialties in different programs are highlighted. So if you did go on for more schooling, the other thing I want to mention is the University of Chicago, where the wonderful fat orange book comes from that we all abide by in book publishing. But the University of Chicago has some wonderful one-off courses that you could take, and that would definitely be an impressive thing to have on your resume if you wanted to do that. Again, those are kind of pricey, and I think that they're 3-week intensive studies in particular areas, but looking at the coursework is really interesting. And even while I was a publisher, I had some of my editors attend their classes just to refresh themselves or to further their knowledge. So I would say the intensive programs that are offered through Denver and Columbia and Stanford, or perhaps University of Chicago, but I don't think it's a must-have. I'll let other people speak into that.
If there's nothing else on that question, we did get one more, so I want to take the time to answer that one too, or have you guys answer it. This question is about how you guys have all stressed the importance of networking and how you can build connections that way. But how do you make meaningful connections while respecting the dignity of other people? Since there can be some temptation to use people for personal gain in your career and all of that. So how do you make these connections while still having them be meaningful from person to person?
I think that's a really good question. I think personally, I feel like you can kind of sense when someone is doing something to just advance to a certain portion of their career rather than creating a meaningful connection. And so I think it's important to just check your motives and really know why you're going into something. And of course, you do want to build your career, you do want to get access to certain opportunities, but I think that doesn't have to be the first thing you run into when building a connection. I think there's power in introducing yourself to someone simply because you want to learn more about them and learn more about what they do and how they got to where they are. And then be honest, like, I'm wondering if you have any opportunities in this realm. I think if you can start with authenticity and honesty, it will get you a lot farther rather than trying to sneakily get a job with someone that works in your field.
I agree, Natalie. I think try to live by the principle of seek to understand before being understood. And so if you are legitimately wanting to understand what does it mean to work in the publishing world, or if you want to understand, I'm a Hope College grad or about to graduate, and I really would love your input on how you got to where you are. And you take the time to understand what that person has gone through and to connect with them on the commonalities that you share. That is probably a better way to approach the situation. And then typically, if I am approached by a Hope College student, I know that they're students and they eventually want me to connect them to somebody or give them some pieces of advice. So similar to what Chris had mentioned, if a high schooler came to you and asked you for some help, you would want to assist them as long as they're being genuine in their approach. So, yeah, and I think always bring a sense of enthusiasm to that connection. You're not looking for a favor, you're not lazy. You should genuinely want to know what they're doing, and you're excited about the possibilities.
Yeah, I've been surprised at the times that it works, where I reached out to the head of a fairly large literary agency, and my note on LinkedIn wasn't very long. It was just like, I just want help. I want to know, like, how does this stuff work? And I was amazed that he took 30 minutes. He answered all the questions, and I think what helped was, like, I wasn't trying to get a job there or anything. I just was really curious about that whole world. And so if you send somebody a message just authentically saying, hey, I'm trying to learn this, it's surprising how many times they actually take the call. And then even if you want a job with them, you don't have to feel like you need to close the deal or whatever at the end of that call. Stay in contact with them, maybe reach out a few months later, and do it more of as a long interaction, and not just, okay, I've got this one shot to try and get a job.
All right, well, that is all of our questions and just about all of our time. We know everyone's busy, and especially our panelists and students listening. So I want to give a final thank you to our panelists that came, and the English department and the Bourland Center for setting this up, and wanted to wish everyone a good night. And again, thank you to everyone that came.